Welcome back to the IU427 garage, everybody. Today, we're working on the 25th anniversary car, and we're going to be working on the dash, the gauges, and probably finishing up some of the wiring. Alright, we're going to be playing a little catch-up here in the beginning because I haven't been grabbing the camera each night as I've been working out here. I posted this on Facebook, I think. If you're getting a complete kit, you get the Ron Francis harness as part of your kit, and that's fine. In most cases, the Ron Francis harness is going to have enough circuits in it to take care of whatever it is you need to do on an average build. There are those instances, though, where you're going to run out of circuits. We're there. Lucky for us, the Coyote control pack is going to be taking care of a lot of the duties that we would normally rely on the Ron Francis harness to do. We are running the fuel pump circuit through the Ron Francis harness. Well, we could realistically eliminate that and run directly off the Ford Coyote control pack. The only thing that we would be missing from that in that instance would be a inertia switch, which could be wired into the Ford control pack. It would just entail putting another relay in line and then basically having that shut off the negative side of the circuit going back to the fuel pump, or you could do it on the positive side too, but the negative side would control the relay. What we ran into is we not only have a heater, wipers, and just about every other option you can think of in this car, we also have seat heaters. And when I looked at the available circuits left in the car, in order to do a circuit for seat heaters, we were just out. I mean, I could have taken the, for one, I could have taken the the choke circuit that you would normally run to the electric portion of a carburetor in order to activate an electric choke. That would have been one circuit. I think that one's rated at 10 amps. And then I could have taken the radio switched power circuit and run that as well for the second seat heater. Then we would essentially be left with none. The owner of the car threw me a curveball when he was here. It's been 2 weeks now. They were here 2 weeks ago this weekend. And he said he would like a switched, basically key-on circuit in the trunk for whatever. He didn't say. It might be for a backup camera or something like that. I don't see the need for a backup camera in one of these cars because honestly you can just turn your head and look, but it's not my car. So I try to facilitate everything that the owner wants into a build. So I decided that I was going to use that choke circuit, that 10 amp choke circuit, and use one of the abandoned purple wires going to the back of the car that we eliminated for the brake light circuit, because our brake lights are going to be activated through the trailer converter that is behind the dash. So neither of those two purple wires going to the back of the car for the left and right brake are being utilized because we're using the turn signal side, which I believe are white and yellow. Again, just going from memory, so don't hold me to it. And he also said that he would like a light in the trunk, which means we have to have a constant hot circuit back there that we can run to a tilt switch so that when he opens the trunk, the light goes on. That has proved more difficult than I thought. But what I did is I took the relay. Where is it? The relay's right here. I took the relay for the cooling fan. So this is the relay for the cooling fan and the Ron Francis harness, and I eliminated it. I took this red wire that is basically hot all the time, and this blue wire, and then both these green wires, these are the activation circuits, and this is just a hot wire that gives power to the relay. I eliminated all those. So the two green wires here, I capped them off with some heat shrink tubing. I did the same thing with the red. And for the blue here, I tied in a switched power on the fuse panel. So basically on the back of the fuse panel, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to get you in there to see it. I don't have the fuse panel drop down right now. I'm going to shine a light in here. So basically in here, if you see all these brass terminals, some of them are open. And so what I did is I tied a blue wire in, which is right, you're not going to be able to see it. It's right there in the middle. And I put a blue wire in it, I think a number 12 blue wire, and I crimped it into one of those open brass inlet outlets. So now I have a switch circuit that I was able to run over to the fuse that was previously for the cooling fan. So what that's going to do is it's going to give us a circuit that is fused that we can use for both of the seat heaters. So I removed the 30 amp fuse that was in there, and I installed a 20 amp. Now the wire is rated for a 30. The problem is that we need to protect the wire that's on the other side, which is quite small. There are only 10 amp circuits for each of those seat heaters, and the wire is quite a bit smaller. So I want to make sure that we protect those. So a 20 amp circuit to feed both of them is going to be perfect. So I got that taken care of. So that blue wire is right here. Basically, I brought that around from where it would go out to the fan in the foot box. So right here is where it used to be. You can see the blue wire still comes out of it on this side and goes out to the harness in the front. But on this side, the blue wire is suspiciously missing, and I put a weather pack plug in there. So it's a little rubber insulator that goes into the terminal to keep debris and water and everything else out of it. So if at a point in the future anybody wants to use that, they can use it for something and have a wire going to the front of the car. But we've got it over here, and this is going to tie into, and you can see how thin these wires are. I've got two of these wires that feed the relays for the seat heaters. So that's something that we're going to be working on as we pull the dash out and start to install the gauges. Now what I did for the circuits going to the back of the car, I've got those two purple wires right here, and I put them into a weather pack. And here's a good view of one of these weather pack insulators that you can put inside in order to cap off the third. Now I had some 2-terminal weather packs, but I thought, you know, there may be a point somewhere down the line that someone wants to add a wire, and this will make a good disconnect for that, meaning they can just tie onto either side of it and have a means of disconnect, because we still have 2 extra wires going down this rear harness. Those 2 wires are for the VSS, so a gray wire and a green wire going down there. So if at any point someone wanted to move those wires over to here and use one for something, they could. I'm just trying to give as much flexibility as we can for everything that we do. And you can see on this other side of this connector, I've got the tan choke wire already tied in. What I'm going to end up doing for that switched power that I need in the back, and here I'll show you where those 2 purples are. They're in the rear harness right here where it goes into the license plate light. So these are in a good spot because it's just about here, and we're going to tie on all of our stuff underneath here to travel up, and then our tilt switch will be in the trunk on the surface of the trunk deck lid out here. So that'll go on after paint. So I've got those 2 wires here. I've also got a ground, and then I've got the license plate light. So I have everything I need back here. Now we also ran some other wires back here for the car owner right here. One is a current limiting cable right here. I think this is a 16-2, and I think these are 2 pair 22 gauge wires. So he's got plenty of flexibility if he wants to add something down the line to add stuff in there. And we'll see, you know, we'll see what he does. So up here, what I was gonna do, and what I think I'm still gonna do, is I've got these wires that are for the courtesy light and the radio memory. The radio memory here is also the clock memory in the dash. It's the same circuit. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this red wire. I'm actually split off of it. I'm going to pull it back in this split loom to a point farther back towards the other side of the car, and I'm going to splice a red wire onto that, and that's going to go to the other side of that weather pack connector I have going to the back with the purple wires, and that's going to be our constant hot that we need for our trunk light. What I'm going to use this side of it for is this is where the pigtail for our battery tender is going to be. So we have a brand new battery tender here, and it comes with both alligator clips, and it comes with some eyelets, some ring terminals. I must have those still in the box, and we're going to mount that inside the glove box here. Now, we're still short the glove box door, so I'm not going to be able to do anything with that until we actually get that from Factory 5. But I was told that it was going to ship out on Tuesday, this past Tuesday. And if that's the case, I probably won't see it till the end of next week, because it has to go through their processing in-house at Factory 5, and by the time it actually gets put in the mail, it probably didn't go out until Friday. So I figure 4 or 5 days to ship it, and I should see it the end of the following week, which will probably be this coming Thursday or Friday. So I've got all this stuff kind of where it needs to go. I've also gone to the extra step of getting the heater circuit, which is right here. Here's the heater circuit, run along with the heater motor wires right here. So I've got that ready to go. And then I've got the wiper circuit over here, the purple, and then I've got the wiper circuits over here ready to go, and you can see those 2 switches are right here and right there. So I'm going to get those all kind of squared away, cut to length, so that when the dash comes off and I'm putting, you know, all the gauges in, I can put all the terminals on the ends of those wires and get that nice and neat. And I'm going to leave just a little bit of excess, so that we'll leave about 6-8 inches behind the dash, and then that'll enable you to take the dash out and lay it down onto the transmission tunnel, and then disconnect any of those wires if you have to pull the dash completely out. I thought about doing weather pack connectors there, but to me, to put a connector 6 inches or 8 inches away from what is already another connector, a spade connector on the switch, doesn't make much sense. So this is the way we're going to do it. The ignition switch, same thing. We're not going to put any weather pack connectors on that. We're just going to use the screws that come with the ignition switch as a mounting base for them. And if it has to come out, it's not that hard to take the finish ring off of the ignition switch and pull it out of the dash. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the dash out of the car, and I'm going to put it over on the back of the F-350 workbench and start getting the gauges installed, and then also start working on tidying up some of this wiring. All right, everybody, next day. Trying to remember where I left off. I know we were working on the dash, and I'll turn around and show you. You can probably see it over my left shoulder. But I worked on some more of the wiring behind the dash. Some of the stuff that I showed you, I ended up actually splicing into the clock circuit, the constant hot clock circuit, which is the same as the radio memory circuit. They're the exact same circuit. They just split off in 2 different directions. One goes to the dash, and it was right near where I had the choke wire come out of the harness as well. So I was able to pull the pin on the weather pack connector that fed the dash, splice on a new wire, put that pin back in, get it heat shrunk tubing around it and all that stuff. So this is what I ended up with there. This is constant hot circuit, and then this is our switch circuit, which is the choke circuit, going to our two purple wires to the back of the car. So you can see this collection of weather pack connectors that we have here. I'm going to give you a little tip. And I may have said this in an earlier video. When you have stuff coming through the firewall, like right here, that's going to have a bolt and a nut on it, or even a popper of it coming from the other side, go ahead and add one of these small cushion clips. And what that'll do is it'll give you a place to pull your wires back and tie wrap them to. I don't want to pull too tight on this because we've got this whole collection of stuff, but you can see as we pull all this back, we'll be able to tie wrap that back onto that cushion clip and keep it pulled away from the actual back of the dash, and it'll keep everything up and out of the way rather than hanging down below the dash. So over here on the other side of those two purple wires, what I ended up doing is kind of the same thing, but in this case I did it for the ground wire. So I had a single ground wire here, and what I did is I pulled back all the way to about here where it comes up through the trunk floor, and I opened up the insulation on the wire, and then I went ahead and spliced two more 16 gauge ground wires. One will be for one of the purple wires that's going to feed our trunk light, and then the other one is that extra switch circuit that the car owner wants for whatever he's planning. So I've got those separated back here. The one that's stripped, that has the insulation off the end, is the way I identified them. That's the one right here that I have the label on. It says switched 12 volt. I'll leave that label on there for the car owner. We'll cap this off safely and roll it up so that in a point in the future where he decides he's going to use this, that'll be available to him. And then this other wire here with its ground is, I've got it stripped on the end, and that was just so I could identify it on the other end. I rang out one of the wires, and this is our constant hot. So you can see these are actually long enough that from here to here I could use my meter on the ohm setting and the tone read, so I could check to make sure which wire was which and then mark them accordingly here at the back of the car. So that's all done. Over here at the dash, I have all of the gauges mounted. Now, don't get all wrapped up in getting the gauges perfectly level right now, because as you are fussing around with the gauges, they're undoubtedly going to move. And it's not that hard, even once the dash goes in, to reach your hand up from behind and move the gauges to get them centered and level, and then put a final turn on the lock ring to keep them in place. So don't get too concerned about making them perfect, because you're going to be moving them while you're wiring them. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go get a bath towel. I'm going to lay it across the back of the workbench here, and I'm going to lay the dash face down on the gauges. And that's going to allow me the opportunity to wire all of the gauges. Now, most of this is just going to be plug and play, because we've rewired everything in our harness to be pretty much plug and play. The only wires that we're actually going to have to splice in are going to be the one wire for the high beam indicator and the two wires for the hazard / brake light indicators in the speedometer. So other than that, we should be able to just plug everything in and have this thing ready to go. So I would expect in an hour I should have the entire dash wired. But I'll bring you back when I get that all squared away. Okay, so I'm going to get over to the dash in a second. I've got that laid out, ready to go, but I wanted to come back to these lights. We're putting these lights in to light up this area of the footbox. So they'll be on the headlight switch knob. So when you turn this knob for the headlight counterclockwise, it'll click, and then that is, on any other car, it would be the dome light. Do cars even have dome lights now? I guess they do. Interior lights. So that's going to turn these on and off. The lights in the trunk are going to be a little bit different. We're going to put those on a tilt switch that is going to mount to the trunk. So I went ahead and I fed the wires through into the 2-inch square tube, and right now I've just got them poking out the side. So if you're working on one of the more modern Factory 5 Mark 3 or Mark 4s, you'll notice there's caps in here. Some of the older cars didn't have these. Actually, I think they didn't start doing this until the Mark 4. So this tube was just open on the side. Anyways, so pop that cover off, and that gives you access to inside here, and your wires will stick out the side. We've got that done on both sides of the car. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to tie in the wires on this side, because I think it's this gray one. So it says courtesy, and this red one says courtesy. Now the red is a constant hot, so don't connect to this while the battery's hooked up in your car, because you'll shock yourself. What we're actually switching in this case is the negative, which is the gray wire. So I'll show you that in a second. That's actually on the headlight switch. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to feed these wires, these two wires, into this square tube, and I haven't decided where. I may do it. It's kind of busy right here, so I think what I may do is I may back those wires up to about here, where the firewall forward is kind of not covering the actual 2-inch square tube, and I'll feed those through there with a grommet, and then down to the end, and then I'll make the wires up here, sending another black and white all the way over to the other side of the car for that light. So that'll take care of those lights. So over here, I'm not going to push this in all the way, but basically when this knob is in, you're going to turn this all the way to the left, and then you'll feel it click. And so I think it's this terminal right here that goes to the rheostat, and that also controls, if you've got incandescent lighting in your dash, that'll control the dim or brightness of the gauges. Now, I don't know if it works that way on the new Speed Hut gauges. I haven't used these new Speed Hut gauges yet. Before, what we would have to do is we would have to bypass the rheostat and use the dimmer switch that came with the gauges. These new gauges didn't come with a rheostat to dim them, so I'm assuming that they'll work with this, but we'll see. So basically, that one of these wires connects to that courtesy light circuit, and then this is the ground for it. You have to make sure you hook this ground up. If you do not, your courtesy lights will not work. So that ground wire is right here in your harness, attached with the rest of the wires for your headlight switch. So make sure you hook that ground up. Over here at the dash, you can see I've got the harness over here and pretty much ready to go. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of lay it over itself right here with the bottom in this position, and then I'm going to work my way from the driver's side towards the passenger side, hooking up things as I go, and then neatly kind of tie wrapping everything so that not only is it somewhat neat, but it's also going to be accessible if any of these gauges were to fail. And that's the thing. These Speed Hut gauges, they look great, they work nice, but there were some reliability issues. And, you know, if somebody at Speed Hut watches my video, I'm not bashing anybody. It's just that the clocks, the oil pressure sensor and gauges, we've had just numerous problems with. I think the only gauge I haven't really had a problem with is water temperature. Every other gauge in these cars I've had an issue with. Speedometer, tachometer, fuel gauge. So I'm just waiting. At some point we're going to have a water temperature gauge that's not going to work properly. Let's hope it's not on this one. So like I said, I'm going to work my way through that. And I saw a question recently about the voltmeter. Now, it didn't used to be this way. basically there were 2 wires coming out of the back of the voltmeter, and you had to hook those up to gauge power and a ground. Now it utilizes the ground that's in the gauge already for the lighting, and then there's a single wire coming off of the voltage gauge, and that is going to hook up to, I saw it just a minute ago, this wire. Gauge feed, it's a brown wire. So that's the one we're going to hook up to. So I'm going to get working on this, and I will bring you guys back in a little while and update you on my progress. The other thing, before I let you go, I always take a little bit of tape and mark the back of the gauges. The tack's easy to figure out. So is the speedometer, because it has the jack for the GPS, so I don't put any markings on the back of them. But when they're face down, if you can't remember which is which, it's kind of a pain in the ass. So I always mark the back with little tape and something that tells me what the gauge is. The fuel gauge, again, it's the only one with a jack on the back, so I'm not too worried about it. But I'll bring you back when I'm a little bit farther along. All right, music update. Rod Stewart, every picture tells a story. Here's where we're at. The dash is all wired. And I know I'm going to get comments about, you know, you should make the dash wiring neater. But the bottom line is that I've had to replace too many of these gauges. And if you wire everything nice and neat, then you're forced to pull the dash off when it comes time to replace one of these gauges. The way I'm wiring them now, and the way I've wired about the last 3 cars, I think it started with the Texas car that Ed and Kathy own. If I have to replace a gauge, I just simply reach up behind the dash, unscrew the lock nut, pull the dash forward, pull out the 2 connectors, or in the case of the speedometer, there's probably 5 or 6 connectors. I pull the dash, the gauge out, send it in, and have it repaired. The other way, I have to pull the whole dash out. And once the whole dash is out, it makes it really inconvenient to drive the car if you want to. I mean, you can live without, you know, a volt gauge or a clock or even a temperature gauge, you know, temporarily if you have to send your gauge in to have it repaired. But with the whole dash out, it makes it really inconvenient. So this is the way I wire them now, and that's just the way it is. So you can see I tried to make everything as easy as possible to service down the line. So on the end of all of our wires for the speedometer, for the turn signal indicators or hazard indicators, the high beam indicator, and the memory for the gauge, I used female and male stake-on connectors. A lot of times I'll put heat shrink over this section of the wires, but in this case, I didn't want to add the bulk to the wire, and honestly, having them just like this makes them easier to pull apart if you have to service the gauge. So I'm going to leave them like that. And then you can see I tie wrapped about 2 or 3 inches, in this case about 2 inches from the actual end connector, so that if you ever had to pull this gauge out, you can just spin the lock ring off, pull the gauge out from the front, and just connect a series of connectors, and the gauge will come right out. I did that on all the gauges, so you can see there's a tie wrap there, there's a tie wrap there. It just makes it really convenient if you ever have to pull any of the gauges out. Now on the switches that are going to go on the bottom, the heater switch, the wiper switch, and the ignition switch, I'm not going to do, I thought about it long and hard, and I'm not going to do weather pack connectors on those. I'm just going to use the stake-on connectors onto the back of the switches for the heater and the wiper switch, and then the ignition switch, we'll just unscrew the trim ring on the front if it ever has to come out. But I did leave enough slack in all those wires so that if the dash has to come out at any point, you can pull the under dash panels out, the 3 screws that are going to hold the dash in across the top, and then the dash will come out and it'll actually lay on the tunnel of the car, the transmission tunnel. And if you need to get in there without pulling the dash completely out of the car, you can just leave it sit there. But so that's that. I've got the lights for the foot boxes all wired in. So you can see this one's all finished. This one has got the black screws in it. I ran out of the black screws. I had to order some. While I was at it, I just ordered trim washers in both black and stainless steel. And then I ordered some stainless steel oval head screws and some black oxide ones so that I'd have them. I use these all the time as screws and finish washers for trim stuff, like, you know, on the panels here and sometimes on the door panels, depending on who they come from. So those are in, and then the wiring is all contained within the 2-inch square tube now. So it's not even visible. And then over here, I think I can get you guys in over here. Over here, what I did is I took those 2 wires that are in the harness to feed those lights, and I fed them into the 2x2 with a grommet here. So the gray and the red both feed down into the 2x2 right here, and then they actually go to the passenger side. So the bulk of the wire is over on the passenger side. Now, it's going to be a bitch if you ever have to service these, but I did make it to where it will be serviceable, because right here where the body comes out and around, you could get in here to pop this cap off, and I left enough slack in the wire to where it could be pulled out through the door opening. If the door was open, for instance, if the door was open, you'd be able to pull that off, get into the wires, and then install a new light. Much more of a concern with the LEDs than it was with the incandescent ones that we used to use. These are just license plate. They list them as license plate lights for trailers and stuff. We got them in the black, and they've got the LEDs. But the LEDs, the bulbs aren't replaceable. So if at some point all 3 of the LEDs burned out, you would have to replace the entire light. So I wanted to make it serviceable without making it ugly. So those caps can come off. It's going to be a bitch to get in there to get them. On this side, you can see I ran out of the black trim screws. So over on this side, I just put the screws that came with the lights in temporarily. And like I said, I've got the screws on order. So once those come in, we will swap those out, and everything will be cool. So I don't know what I'm going to be doing tomorrow. So we'll have to see what happens. But as of now, we're getting pretty close to getting everything squared away as far as the wiring is concerned. I've got a date with Jeff Miller, the painter, in about 2 weeks. So I'm going to be following up with him this coming week to make sure that we're all squared away on when we're going to be bringing the car in there. And then we'll bring it back here and get it carpeted and get all the last minute issues done with it, and see how it goes. So hopefully I'll get that glove box door this coming week too, and then I can finish up the dash completely, because that would be nice. But I'll see you guys all tomorrow. All right, everybody, next day. I am just about wrapped up with all of the wiring on the 25th anniversary car. I have everything to a point where now everything is going to just plug in for the most part. Little things like the battery tender, and then our 12-volt USB outlet that's going to go in the passenger under dash panel. Those I'm going to have to plug in. But other than that, I think I got every connector on the car. So let me walk you around the car. We'll take a look. We'll start over here on the driver's side of the car, and you can see I've got a connector all ready to go for our turn signal switch from Russ Thompson. I have all the wires over here for our hazard light switch, our high-low beam switch, and our headlight switch. They're all ready to be plugged in and ready to go over here. The ignition switch is all put back together. Since first start, I've had it apart, and now it's back together, so that's done. I have all the relays mounted for the seat heaters. So I have those marked driver's side and passenger side, and then I just have some trim screws holding them into the dash support. Those are going to be fine. We've done them this way before, and they'll stay there, and it won't be a problem. I have the seat heaters wired in to the harness now, so you can see I've got the ground wires going over to our ground stud, and then the red wires connect to the blue wire right here that I grabbed from the cooling fan, since we're not using the cooling fan circuit in the in the Ron Francis harness. So that's all finished up. Anything over here? No. I think we're done on this side. So over on the other side of the car, we've got, I'm waiting on the screws for the lights because I've still got the silver screws in there. Those should be here any day. I did get the finish washers today, so thank you very much for those, Stan. I've got the ground wire right here, which is going to split off and do both our 12 volt USB outlet and our battery charger. Actually, it's the other way around. This one's going to be the battery charger. This is 14 gauge wire, which is the main wire. I dropped it down to 16 gauge for the USB because that's what the size of the wire is that is supplied in the Factory 5 harness. We're actually using the radio power here, the brown one. And then we've, of course, got the radio memory, which is the wire that we're going to use to tie our battery charger into. You can see a third relay down here. Now, this third relay is for our heater vacuum switch. Let me explain this. I'll try to explain it in layman's terms. The valve itself, the 4-port valve, at rest, is full flow. And we don't want it full flow when we're not using the heater because it's going to make the heater box really hot. So what we're doing is we've got a relay behind the dash that is actually going to take power away from our vacuum switch that's in the front of the car, and that is going to move the valve to the bypass position, because as it stands with that switch off, meaning no vacuum, we have water circulating through the heater core. We don't want that. So this was an easy way, an inexpensive way. The relay and the relay mounting base is about $10. And you need a 5-pin relay. You can't get away with a 4-pin relay because we're using the side of the relay that is energized when the coil of the relay has no power. So basically we're sending power to the vacuum switch all the time. So as soon as you start up the car, it gets power, it puts the valve in bypass. When you turn the actual heater switch on, it takes away power from that vacuum switch, and then it allows coolant to flow to the heater core. So we've got that done, and then what I did here is I've got both of the switches that are going to mount on our dash done. So here is our wiper switch. Now you can see I've got one of our terminal caps here, and that's simply because I did the wire a little bit different than they show in the diagram from Factory 5. I didn't want to send this purple all the way out to the wiper motor because it wasn't long enough, and I didn't want to extend it. So I used all the wires that they sent us. They gave us a red and a black, and so I used that going out to the motor, and then I've just got the purple tied to the red here, and then that comes back on the white right here, and that's the park feature on the switch. So that's all done, so that's ready to go. And then I have our heater switch, and in here, this last terminal that they say not used, actually when you turn this switch in any position, low, medium, or high, it sends 12 volt to this unused terminal. And so that's what we're using right there to open and close our relay right up here. And so that's what's going to take the power away from our vacuum switch and allow that coolant to flow to the heater box and warm it up. So that's what we got going on over here, and I think that's going to wrap everything up on the wiring. Other than, you know, strapping everything up and getting it nice and neat and pretty, we're pretty much done. So I think I'm going to wrap this one up here. As always, I want to thank every one of you for watching. We appreciate every view. If you're enjoying the content here, please do the like, the share, the subscribe, comment if you like. We'll see you all next time. Have a great day.